The envelope trembled in Sarah Chen's hands as she stared at the hospital letterhead. Her vision blurring with tears she refused to let fall. Stage 3. The words had echoed in her mind for 72 hours straight, drowning out everything else. The hum of the refrigerator, the traffic outside her window, even her own heartbeat. She had built her entire life on being dependable, the person others could count on, the woman who showed up early and stayed late, who remembered birthdays and covered shifts without complaint. Now sitting alone in her cramped apartment with medical bills scattered across, her coffee table like fallen leaves, she realized that all her hard work, all her sacrifice, couldn't save her from the one thing money could: time. And time, according to Dr. Morrison's somber expression, was something she might not have much of anymore. Sarah had worked at Meridian Tech for 6 years, climbing from a junior analyst to the director of operations through sheer determination and countless sleepless nights. The company had been her second family, sometimes her first, given how many holidays she'd spent in the office while her actual family celebrated states away. She'd helped build the customer service department, from 12 people to over 200, streamlining processes that saved the company millions. Her colleagues called her the backbone of the organization, though she'd always brushed off the compliment with an embarrassed laugh and a change of subject. But backbones, she'd learned, could break. The diagnosis had come on a Tuesday, sandwiched between her morning coffee and an afternoon presentation to the board. She'd been ignoring the symptoms for months: the fatigue, the persistent ache in her side, the way her clothes hung looser despite her unchanged diet. There was always another deadline, another crisis, another reason to put off that doctor's appointment. When she finally went, urged by her friend Monica, who physically dragged her to the clinic, she'd expected a lecture about stress and maybe a prescription for vitamins. Instead, she got the word no one ever wants to hear: cancer. The treatment plan Dr. Morrison outlined would cost over $300,000, even with her insurance covering a portion. Her deductible alone was $15,000, money she didn't have, not after helping her parents with their mortgage last year, not after being the family member everyone else leaned on when times got tough. The irony wasn't lost on her that she'd spent years taking care of everyone else, and now, when she needed help most, she felt utterly alone. For 3 days, she'd called her supervisor in sick, something she'd never done in 6 years except for one bout of food poisoning that had laid her flat. She sat in her apartment, scrolling through medical financing websites, calculating and recalculating numbers that refused to add up to anything but impossible. She considered crowdfunding, but couldn't bear the thought of becoming someone's charity case. She thought about telling her parents, but knew they'd mortgage the house again, and they were already struggling. On the 4th day, she knew she had to go back to work. She had to tell them. She had to quit. The thought of walking away from Meridian Tech felt like tearing off a piece of herself. But what choice did she have? She needed to focus on treatment, on fighting this thing growing inside her. She couldn't give the company the version of herself they deserved while battling for her life. It wasn't fair to them, and it wasn't fair to her. She drafted her resignation letter 17 times before settling on simple honesty, health reasons requiring her immediate departure. No details, no drama, just a clean break. The way she tried to handle everything in life, with dignity and minimal fuss. But as she printed the letter, her printer jammed, and she found herself laughing through tears at the universe's sense of humor. That's when she saw it, the hospital bill on her desk, the one outlining the first phase of treatment costs, $14,732. The number had burned itself into her brain. In her exhausted, emotionally wrung-out state, she grabbed the wrong envelope. Marcus Webb, CEO of Meridian Tech, wasn't supposed to be the one opening departmental reports that Friday morning. His assistant was out with the flu, and he'd decided to handle his own correspondence for once, thinking it might keep him grounded, remind him of the early days when he did everything himself. At 62, Marcus had built Meridian from a garage startup to a billion-dollar enterprise, but he'd never forgotten what it felt like to choose between paying rent and buying groceries, to lie awake at night wondering if his dream would survive another month. He recognized Sarah Chen's name immediately. She was legendary in the company, the kind of employee every CEO wished they could clone. He'd read her performance reviews, seen her impact on the bottom line, and more importantly, Heard the stories from other employees about her kindness, her willingness to mentor, her habit of bringing in homemade soup when someone was sick. He'd been planning to promote her to vice president of operations at the next board meeting. The envelope contained a single sheet of paper, but it wasn't a report. Marcus read the hospital bill 3 times, his heart sinking with each pass. Stage 3 cancer. Treatment plan. Costs. He saw the dates. She'd gotten this diagnosis days ago and hadn't told anyone. Of course she hadn't. That was Sarah. Always carrying burdens alone, always putting others first. He sat back in his leather chair, the one luxury he'd allowed himself when the company went public, and thought about his own sister. Lymphoma had taken Rachel when she was 34, leaving behind 2 kids and a husband who'd been crushed by medical debt on top of grief. Marcus had been building Meridian then, every dollar tied up in the company, and he'd watched helplessly as his brother-in-law lost their house, his credit, nearly his will to live. That guilt had never left him. He picked up his phone and dialed Sarah's extension. It rang 4 times before she answered, her voice carefully professional despite the tremor he could detect beneath it. "Sarah, it's Marcus Webb. Could you come to my office, please?" The walk to the executive floor felt like a death march. Sarah clutched her resignation letter, her palms sweating, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst through her chest. Everyone knew being summoned to the CEO's office wasn't good. She must have made some catastrophic mistake. Maybe they'd found out about her diagnosis somehow. Maybe they wanted to let her go before she could quit, save on severance. Marcus's office was all glass and light, overlooking the city skyline. He stood when she entered, gesturing to the chairs by his window rather than the formal desk setup. His expression was unreadable. "Sarah, I received your report this morning," he said, and she felt her stomach drop. "Or rather, I received this." He held up the hospital bill. The floor seemed to tilt beneath her feet. Heat rushed to her face, mortification so complete she wanted to disappear. "Mr. Webb, I am so sorry. I didn't mean to. I must have grabbed the wrong envelope. I was going to tender my resignation and Why?" His voice was gentle, cutting through her panic. "Why what? Why were you going to resign?" She stared at him, confused. "Because I have cancer. I need treatment. I can't possibly give the company what it needs from me right now. I need to focus on getting well, and that's going to take time and energy I won't have for work. And the medical costs? That's why you were resigning? To focus on affording treatment?" Tears spilled over despite her best efforts. "Mr. Webb, I don't have the money. Even with insurance, the costs I can't afford both treatment and my life. I need to figure something out, maybe sell my car, my apartment. I can't burden the company with an employee who..." "It's paid." The words hung in the air between them. Sarah was certain she'd misheard. "What?" "It's paid," Marcus repeated, his voice thick with emotion. "Your medical bills, the treatment, all of it. It's covered." Sarah's legs gave out, and she sank into the chair behind her. I don't understand." Marcus pulled his own chair closer, sitting so they were eye level. "Sarah, do you know what you've meant to this company? Not just in metrics and performance reviews, but in culture? You've helped dozens of employees navigate crises, covered for people during family emergencies, mentored every new hire who walked through our doors. You've built something here that goes beyond quarterly earnings. That's my job." "No," he said firmly. "That's who you are. And this company, I built it on the principle that we take care of our people. Not because it's good business, though it is, but because it's right. My sister died from cancer 25 years ago, and I watched medical debt destroy what was left of her family. I swore then that if I ever had the power to prevent someone else from facing that choice between treatment and financial ruin, I would." Sarah couldn't speak, couldn't process what she was hearing. "I'm not paying your medical bills out of charity, Sarah. I'm doing it because you've given this company 6 years of loyalty, dedication, and heart. Because you've made Meridian better simply by being part of it. Because everyone here needs to know that when they're facing the worst moment of their lives, we're going to stand with them. Mr. Webb, I can't accept..." "You can and you will. And you're not resigning. You're taking a medical leave with full salary and benefits. When you're ready, if you're ready, you come back. If you need 6 months, a year, however long, your position will be here." The tears came in earnest now. Years of holding everything together finally cracking open. Marcus handed her a box of tissues and waited, patient and kind. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do this?" "Because kindness isn't expensive, Sarah. Indifference is. And because I believe we're all here to help each other through the hard parts. That's what makes us human." 6 months later, Sarah stood in front of the company at the annual meeting, her hair growing back in soft curls after chemotherapy, her body tired but healing. Marcus had asked her to speak, though she'd been terrified to stand in front of everyone who knew what had happened. "I learned something this year," she said, her voice steady despite her nerves. "I learned that asking for help isn't weakness, that accepting kindness isn't the same as accepting charity, and that the measure of a company, the measure of any of us, really, is what we do when someone falls down. Do we step over them, or do we stop and help them up?" She looked at Marcus, who sat in the front row with tears in his eyes. "Mr. Webb didn't just pay my medical bills. He showed me that I matter beyond what I produce, beyond my job title, beyond my usefulness. He showed me that humanity still exists in business, in corporate America, in a world that often feels cold and transactional. And that gift, that kindness, saved my life, in more ways than just the medical treatment." The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes, but Sarah only saw Marcus, who mouthed 2 simple words: "Thank you." Because sometimes the greatest gifts we give aren't things we buy. They're the moments we choose compassion over convenience, humanity over profit, connection over indifference. They're the times we see someone drowning and throw them a lifeline, without asking if they deserve it. And sometimes those gifts come back to us in ways we never expect, enriching our own lives far more than we enriched others.